there's a lot of phrases that we use when we talk about, UX and design and things, and there are lots of sort of cliches, right? It's not rocket science. We're not doing brain surgery here. We're not this. I mean, you've heard the melding, which is rocket surgery. It's not rocket surgery. But there have actually been instances where that has kind of been the case. For instance, we did a user experience audit and interface redesign / consulting project for a company called Homeland, who had a contract with the Department of Homeland Security. What they were working on was an incident management application for first responders, meaning that the folks who are on scene for major incidents, fires, earthquakes, tornadoes, you can imagine. I mean, globally and locally, it's a case where, and I didn't realize this, but these folks who are on the ground and trying to deal with the situation at hand just by itself also have a sort of a monstrous chain of command that has to be taken care of and managed. There are a million resources that have to be allocated and managed, and at every step there's also a lot of documentation that needs to happen. So every time someone gives someone a direct order, again, in the throes of, okay, there's flame all around, all around you, they have to account for, 600 other things at every turn. So they have no central way currently of managing this, of managing all this stuff. It's on paper. It's a manual process. So this company comes up with a way, leveraging tools like Google's geospatial mapping features and things like that. They come up with a way to put all this on either a netbook or even in some cases a mobile device, and say, okay, you have everything you need at your fingertips. You even have your resource allocation. You're talking to people via real-time instant messaging. You have check-ins and see who's on the scene, what other districts and organizations and departments are on the scene, fire, police, bomb squad, whatever it happens to be. You're managing all this from one central piece. Now, the sort of kicker is, from a user experience perspective, imagine this interface. You have to have access to probably 40 different things at any given time, and it all essentially has to fit on the surface of a cup of coffee. Okay, so it really was a challenging project where we had to figure out, okay, do a lot of research and figure out what's the normal sort of chain of events that happens in these situations. What has to happen first? What has to happen second? What's of primary importance? Secondary? What stuff can we sort of hide behind, the first layer, but how easy does it need to be to access that stuff instantaneously, to get to it and act on it? So we spent, I don't know, at least half a year doing all kinds of independent research, talking to first responder groups. Lantec themselves had a lot of user sessions, and they did a lot of quantitative and qualitative feedback. And we sort of iterated on a prototype where each time the prototype was shown to these groups. And where it wound up is currently, in its current iteration, feedback has been, almost all completely positive, where people from these units are actually looking at us and saying, we can't believe that you've done this. Okay, we just, in our wildest dreams, that we never even imagined something like this could exist. Now, that's a cliche thing to say, but that's exactly what we're hearing. So, in a roundabout way, you get to this idea of, okay, well, a really, truly valuable, useful user experience can actually save people's lives. And that's a pretty powerful thing. Well, it goes back to what I've said often about the difference between developers and engineers versus designers and user experience architects. Okay, they're two completely different schools of thought. The initial prototype was developed by engineers. Okay, and it looked like it was developed by engineers. Okay, these are folks who are cognitively very, very good at grasping a large, complex data set at any given moment and effortlessly sort of weeding through it. Okay, so 9 times out of 10, that's the kind of thing that they build. They look at it and they're evaluating it, okay, but they're evaluating it based on sort of a criteria where it's very difficult to be objective. You know, it's your skill set. It's what you're sort of trained to do, and it's what's ingrained in you. So it was difficult to use. Everything was sort of up front. There were, you know, too many choices, too much information. It was cognitive overload, essentially. Again, you're in a pressure situation, you're in a crisis situation, lives are at stake, property is at stake, things are on fire, okay? Things are crumbling down around you, and you have to make very snap decisions. You have no time to figure out how this interface works. Okay, what happens if I press this? What does this menu do? What is this? Those cannot be questions because there's no time to develop the answers. So the reason they brought us in the first place was to say, we realize that the user interface is a critical part of gaining acceptance. So we want you to come in, we want you to look at this, and we want you to go through a sort of a thorough audit and tell us what works and what doesn't and why and how to make it better. You know, and in some cases that was solely just a visual treatment of things on a screen, but in the larger cases it was about reorganizing task flow to match, you know, typical activity, to match, again, the level of pressure and the level of stress and the space of time in which these folks have to make decisions. You know, so everything that we did was based on that.